Okay, let's unpack this. We're doing a deep dive into some really fascinating sources you shared. Looks like an article and a presentation, both focused on LinkedIn influencer strategy.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
And it's a topic that, well, it gets right to a really crucial point pretty quickly. The sources make it super clear that a one-size-fits-all approach.
Yeah.
It just doesn't fly for building influence on LinkedIn.
Right. So trying to copy what someone with, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of followers is doing.
Yeah.
And applying that when you're maybe just starting out with a few thousand. The sources basically say that's just a recipe for frustration, poor results, wasted effort.
Totally. And that really sets the stage for what we're trying to do here, our sort of mission for this deep dive.
Yeah.
We want to understand why that generic approach falls flat.
Mm-hmm.
And then really, dig into the specific tailored strategies that the sources recommend for that smallest level of influencer.
The nano-influencers, right. And the
Yeah.
sources, they define these as folks on LinkedIn with, 1,000 to just under 10,000 followers?
Yep, 1,000 to 9,999. That's the range they give.
And what's really interesting, and the sources point this out, is that these nano-influencers, they actually have some, unique strengths, things that the bigger accounts often lack.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was fascinating, actually, seeing the breakdown on the presentation. They had, nano, then micro, which was 10K to about 50K.
Okay.
Mid-tier up to almost 500K. Macro up to 1 million. And then the megas over 1 million. Each level really operates differently.
And the reason a mega strategy doesn't work for a nano isn't just the sheer number of followers, is it? The sources talk about unique value propositions.
That's a big part of it, yeah.
Yeah.
Each level kind of offers something distinct.
Right.
Plus, there's also, the audience expectation. Smaller audiences like the ones nanos tend to build, they inherently expect more personal connection, more authenticity. That's just a totally different vibe than managing some massive, broad audience.
Yeah, different dynamic.
And then there are the practical things, right? Time, resources. Your strategy has to fit your actual scale.
Yeah.
You can't just pretend you have a team of 10 when it's just you.
Makes sense. So, okay, let's zero in on those nano-influencers then. The sources call them hidden powerhouses. What exactly are these unique strengths you mentioned?
Well, according to the article, one of the big ones is their intense niche focus. Like really intense.
Okay.
They're usually not trying to be everything to everyone. They tend to have this deep specialized knowledge in a very specific area. And that naturally attracts a highly relevant, really devoted following who, trust their insights implicitly.
Okay, so it's not just having expertise, it's having that super specific expertise that sets them apart.
Precisely. And building right on that, the sources highlight their high authenticity.
Oh, okay.
Because the audience is smaller, it often knows them through that specific niche.
Yeah.
The connections just feel more personal, less curated, more genuinely human. It doesn't feel overly commercial.
Yeah, that makes sense. It feels more like getting advice from a trusted colleague, maybe, rather than, I don't know, a celebrity endorsement.
Exactly. And this personal connection, it translates directly into excellent engagement. The sources actually show data suggesting that nano-influencers often have way higher engagement rates.
Wait, hang on. Higher rates, like percentage-wise compared to the mega influencers?
Yeah.
That feels counterintuitive. How do the sources explain that?
They link it straight back to what we just talked about, that hyper-niche focus. It pulls in a truly invested audience.
Right.
And the authenticity makes people want to interact personally. It's really a quality over quantity thing.
Okay.
And this high engagement within that specific niche gives them what the sources call overlooked value. For certain brands or specific campaigns, a nano's ability to reach and genuinely influence a very targeted group.
Yeah.
That can be incredibly powerful, sometimes more so than just a broad shout from a mega influencer.
Huh. That's actually a crucial insight. That their smaller size and focus isn't a weakness, it's actually a source of unique value. Okay. So knowing these strengths, the niche focus, authenticity, high engagement, this overlooked value, what are the actual concrete strategies the sources recommend for nanos to, leverage this power?
Right. So the presentation lays out 5 key strategies. The first one is hyper-niche content creation.
Okay, which ties right back to that specific expertise we were talking about.
Absolutely. The sources say, first step, you've got to clearly identify your almost granular area of expertise, super specific.
Right.
Then the content you create has to be incredibly targeted. They give examples like, don't just do general leadership tips. Do something like 3 common communication pitfalls for first-time engineering managers.
Ah, much more specific.
Or, sharing my candid experience implementing this specific industry compliance software, really getting into the weeds.
So it's about speaking directly to the very specific problems or interests of their niche audience, not trying to appeal broadly.
Exactly. It's solving real, specific pain points for a specific group. And by consistently providing that level of detailed, expert insight, well, that's how nano-influencers build undeniable authority and attract exactly the right kind of audience.
The kind that's highly engaged because you're basically speaking their language about their specific challenges.
You got it.
Okay, fascinating. So once you're creating that laser-focused content, how do you build momentum? What's strategy number 2?
The second one is active community engagement. And this isn't just, posting your own stuff and walking away.
Right. It sounds like maybe spending significant time actually reacting and adding value to other people's content, not just broadcasting.
Precisely. The sources really push spending significant time in relevant LinkedIn groups. And not just dropping links to your own stuff, obviously.
Yeah, no spamming.
Right. But genuinely contributing insights, answering questions people have, sharing valuable perspectives based on your niche expertise. The goal is really to become recognized as a helpful, knowledgeable member of that community.
Okay. And what about commenting on just individual posts, like outside of groups, in the main feed?
Yeah, they emphasize avoiding those generic, great post comments. The sources say make thoughtful, insightful comments on posts within your niche feed. Add specific value. Maybe ask a follow-up question that shows you actually read it and engaged with it.
Right.
Or share a brief, relevant personal experience. It's not just about getting noticed. It's about building real rapport and establishing yourself as a valuable voice in those relevant conversations.
I like that. Earning visibility by genuinely adding value to others first. Okay, what's strategy?
Strategy 3 is personal storytelling that resonates.
Okay, this has got to be tied to that authenticity strength we talked about.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
The sources really highlight the power of sharing your professional journey. And that includes, both the successes and, crucially, the setbacks.
Ah, the bumps in the road.
Yeah. Being willing to be a bit vulnerable about challenges you faced, reflecting honestly on how you navigated them, that makes your content incredibly relatable and inspiring, actually, to others who might be on a similar path.
So it's definitely not just a polished highlight reel of only the wins.
Oh, far from it.
Yeah.
The sources really emphasize that the key is extracting the lessons learned from those experiences. You transform your personal stories into actionable insights that other people can actually apply.
Right.
And that kind of, vulnerability and authenticity, it just fosters deeper emotional connections. It builds a really loyal audience who feel like they actually know you and trust you.
That makes a lot of sense for building that specific nano-influencer connection. Okay, strategy 4.
Strategy 4 is strategic networking over broadcasting.
Okay, I'm guessing this means focusing on the quality of connections, not just racking up huge numbers.
Exactly. Quality over quantity, definitely. It's about being really proactive in building connections, but strategically.
How so?
Well, the sources suggest actively seeking out and connecting with specific professionals within your niche, not just blasting out random requests. At this nano stage, building a network of truly relevant, meaningful connections is way more impactful than just accumulating a large number of sort of weak ties.
And how do you make those connection requests meaningful, not just the generic click?
Personalization is key, according to the sources. When you send that request, reference something specific, a shared interest, maybe a mutual connection, or specifically mention a piece of their content that you appreciated or found insightful.
Ah, sure, you've done your homework.
Right. A generic request is so easy to ignore, but a thoughtful one? That opens the door to a genuine conversation, maybe even relationship building. The goal here is two-way interaction, not just adding another number to your follower account.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've covered hyper-niche content, active community engagement, personal storytelling, and strategic networking. What's the 5th strategy they recommend?
The 5th one is all about leveraging small-scale collaboration power. And the sources even, interestingly, break down how nano-influencers might want to, allocate their collaboration efforts.
Oh, really? Like percentages? Okay, tell me more about that.
Yeah, they suggest allocating maybe around 25% of collaboration efforts to partnering with peers. So other nano or maybe even micro-influencers in complementary niches.
Okay, so working together.
Yeah, allows for mutual benefit, sharing audiences, creating combined value. Another 25% could be dedicated specifically to creating shared content series, where maybe you and a peer explore a topic together, but from slightly different angles.
Interesting. And what about like written content?
Right. They suggest co-authored articles could make up about 30% of those efforts. That combines expertise, obviously provides richer content, and instantly exposes your work to your co-author's audience too.
Double the reach, potentially.
Exactly. And then finally, maybe about 20% could be for things like LinkedIn live sessions, hosting discussions with other professionals. Again, offering diverse perspectives to both your audiences.
So actively collaborating with other creators, especially those at a similar stage, is actually a pretty significant piece of the puzzle for growth.
Yeah, it's presented as a really key driver, both for growth and for reaching those adjacent audiences, but in a credible way. And the sources also touch on something else related, the power of user-generated content.
UGC, right.
Specifically noting its kind of authentic advantage for nano-influencers.
Okay, what exactly do the sources mean by user-generated content in this context? And how can nanos actually leverage that?
So UGC here basically means getting your audience to create or share things that relate back to your content or your niche.
Okay.
The sources recommend things like creating content that explicitly encourages your audience to share their own experiences or results after trying your advice, for instance. And importantly, to tag you when they do.
Ah, okay, so it's like social proof, but super authentic because it's coming directly from their actual followers, people in the same boat, maybe.
Exactly. They suggest asking followers, maybe, to share success stories after they implemented your tips or maybe used tools you recommended, and then featuring those stories.
Right.
It showcases real-world results, and it massively boosts your credibility because it's this unfiltered endorsement from a peer. And the sources also mention, interestingly, how brands might approach working with nano-influencers differently because of this.
How so?
Well, they suggest brands might consider just gifting products or services to nano-influencers they align with, but without requiring a post in return.
Wait, really? So it's not like a formal sponsored post deal, but more like hoping for an organic mention if they genuinely like it.
Precisely. That's the idea. If the nano-influencer genuinely loves the product or service, their organic sharing about it will just feel incredibly authentic. It'll resonate really deeply with their audience because it comes across as a personal recommendation from a trusted source.
Which, as we discussed, is kind of the nano-influencer's superpower, that trust.
Exactly. That kind of genuine testimonial, it just carries far more weight than something that feels like an obvious ad, especially to an audience that really values that trust over, polish.
That's a really interesting angle on brand partnerships specifically for this level.
Yeah, it really highlights that for nanos, the true value isn't in some massive reach metric. It's in that deep, authentic connection and the trust their specific audience places in them.
So, okay, bringing this all together,
Yeah.
what does this all mean? This deep dive into these sources, it really underscores that building influence on LinkedIn, well, it isn't just about hitting some magic follower number, is it?
Not at all.
It's fundamentally about tailoring your approach to where you actually are right now, leveraging the unique strengths you possess at that stage.
Absolutely. The nano-influencers, with their intense niche focus, the genuine authenticity, and that surprisingly high engagement, they actually have a really powerful foundation to build on. But only, and this is the key part, if they use strategies designed specifically for them, not just trying to poorly imitate tactics that only really work for the macros or the megas.
Right. So by focusing on that hyper-niche content, actively participating and adding value in the right communities, sharing their real professional journey bumps and all, building those strategic, meaningful connections and collaborating smartly with peers, they can actually create real lasting impact, even with a smaller audience.
Which, raises a really important question, I think. If these sources show that authenticity and focused community interaction and genuine connection are so incredibly valuable for building trust at that nano level, how might those core principles apply to your own professional connections and the content you create, regardless of what your current audience size happens to be?
That's definitely something worth considering as you navigate your own journey on LinkedIn. Good food for thought.